You are now tuned in to the STL Bucket List Show. This show is supported by stlouisarts.org, your place to explore everything that makes St. Louis so special, creative, and vibrant. From music, theater, festivals, galleries, comedy, and more, head over to stlouisarts.org to find your vibe today. Ladies, gents, Tecovas Boots and Western Goods are coming to St. Louis, and you're invited to their grand opening event Friday, September 29th and Saturday, September 30th at Plaza Frontneck. They'll have live music, free drinks, and swag bags all weekend long. Stop by, grab a cold one, and let their knowledgeable staff get you fitted and acquainted with a mighty comfortable, handcrafted pair of boots that you'll enjoy for years to come. September 29th and 30th at Plaza Frontneck. Tecovas, don't go gently. We'll see y'all there.
If you want to hear about St. Louis, tune into the Bucket List Show weekly. Hear what Marissa and Luke say. It drops every Wednesday. Got a dope new guest every single week. Buckle up for the ride. Who's it gonna be? Who's on the show today? They rep St. Louis. What to do in the loo on a late night, or maybe what to do on a date night. Yeah, Bucket List has you covered. They know what's going on. What's going on? They'll give you, hey, 18 different things to do, or 19 if you need one more to choose. Yeah, the city is a place we call home. A place we call home. Yeah.
What's up, guys? Thank you again for tuning in to another week of the STL Bucket List Show. This is episode 81.
81.
Okay. I'm your host, Marissa Farrell.
And I'm your other host, Luke Farrell. And guys, we couldn't do this show without you. I know that I say this each and every week, but if you didn't listen, we wouldn't have a show. And that's the most beautiful thing. We get to connect the community and highlight the people, places, and events that make St. Louis special. And before we get into our special guest today, as you guys know, our friends over at the Regional Arts Commission of St. Louis have always supported this show from the beginning. And we're going to be doing some cool stuff with stlouisarts.org. So we're excited about that. Of course, our friends over at Four Hands and the Wine and Cheese Place and Spirit Wine and Craft right here in St. Louis, locally owned since the 80s. They got 5 locations right here in St. Louis. So, guys, thank you for listening. I'll let Marissa do an intro today, and we'll get into our guest today.
Without further ado, MK Stallings, Research and Evaluation Manager and a poet. Yes. Welcome to the show.
For the Regional Arts Commission.
I was getting to that. Let me finish that. Yes, for RAC, our friends over at RAC. Thank you for being here.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be in this space. We love you over here at RAC, and so I'm just glad to be here, to be able to be on this side of it for a bit.
Yeah, and especially when you do stuff behind the scenes, and it's like you're working on these things, and a lot of times, even with my business and even with teaching, it's all the same, is that we have to work, and you don't see that instant gratification until a long time. So what you've been working on has been years and hours and pages and late nights and collaboration, and so I want to get into that first, just so that our listeners kind of know your role. If you could just tell us what you've been working on, tell us a little bit about what you do there at the Regional Arts Commission of St. Louis.
Yeah, so I stepped into the Research and Evaluation Manager role on June 20th. And before then, I was a consultant just doing research. My big project was Arts and Economic Prosperity, which was getting with all these different organizations in the region, particularly arts and culture organizations, and figuring out what kind of economic impact they've had on the St. Louis metro area, particularly St. Louis City and St. Louis County. And so that means, going out to their events all the time. So looking at their event schedule, going to their events, interviewing or really just surveying their audience members. And then from there, taking that data, taking it over to our friends in Washington, D.C. We work with Americans for the Arts, where they begin to tabulate all the data and to make things make sense. And so we'll be dropping this report really soon, but it came from hours of work and of data collection at events, and then following up and contacting these organizations to get them to complete a survey as well, because essentially every penny that they spend impacts our region. Those are dollars that are circulating in our region that wouldn't have been circulating otherwise. And so we try to capture that data, and I was the one who was leading that effort.
Yeah, that's incredible. I mean, like you said, it's a lot of work, but also a lot of fun, because you got to go to these events. You had an excuse to get out in the community.
You have to love it.
That's right. No, it's been really cool. Got a chance to go to a lot of fairs, a lot of festivals, a lot of events that I wouldn't have had a good reason to go to, except as a fan, if it wasn't for this research.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So you have an extensive background of art yourself. So dating back to middle school, you were doing hip hop.
Absolutely. I think the first time I started crafting bars, the first time I freestyled, I was 7 years old. I heard LL Cool J with what was it? I'm Bad.
Yeah.
And I started freestyling. I'm pretty sure I was trash, but it was a good experience. From there, I started writing poetry, for different girls I liked. And then by middle school, I was putting together my little Casio keyboard and my little raps. I was making beats on my Casio keyboard, and I would like dub that, and then I would overdub with my lyrics, and then I would take that to school and say, "Oh, check this out," or whatever.
So cool.
And yeah, they would listen to it like, "Man, who did this for you?" I'm like, I did it because it was just my little recorder or whatever. So it was that kind of experience. And then later on, I got a chance to kind of step up the effort with my brother, my oldest brother. He records in like a studio, little home studio, and we got a chance to do some things. He lives out in Jefferson City and has lived there for a long time. He went to Lincoln University there. And so we got a chance to, record not just a demo, it was like an album. and actually some of my stuff is still out there. Somebody posted without my permission, content from that album. But God bless him, it was cool. It's so it's on YouTube, a couple different YouTube channels, I don't know, whatever. And I'm just surprised that somebody took the time to do it, because they had to have had the physical copy and they had to make it available as an MP3, because back when we recorded it, it was only a CD. So yeah, I've been in and out of the arts, in the arts for a long time, and I've had an opportunity to do some recording work, being a poet much later on, arts administrator much later on, but it's been a part of my life for basically all of it. So
wow. So let's talk a little bit, going back to the good old days in school and just like your upbringing in St. Louis, and shed some light on where you went to school and your family dynamic and how you kind of got to where you are now.
Yeah, it's interesting. So I went to Normandy School District. Before I got into that, though, I had a good fortune of going to a place called Frederick Douglass. Frederick Douglass is it's an Afrocentric school, and it emerges at a time in St. Louis history where people were deeply connected to their culture, right? Whatever their culture is. And in this case, in the Black community, that is identifying some part of the continent of Africa as being their cultural heritage. And that extends from like the late 1960s with cats like Maulana Karenga and pushing this cultural nationalist movement that would eventually result in something like Kwanzaa. Bottom line, though, when I was like in the 80s, my mom put me in this school for a couple of years. It was a really close-knit environment. Got a chance to meet some really cool people, learned about different parts of African culture, because it's diverse, it's a big continent. So they kind of took pieces of it from here and there and gave me an opportunity to get to know a part of myself that I wouldn't have learned otherwise. Because certainly when I got to Normandy, that wasn't the case. Normandy, public schools in general, they don't necessarily have those kinds of classes that allow you to kind of explore those topics. And so, but I got a chance to meet people, do things. And when I got to high school, I was able to be in the talent show, and it was cool because I went to the same high school as my guy, Black Spade, who is a music producer, rapper, singer, fashion designer. Yeah, he's all over. And the cool thing about it was that he was an upperclassman at the time, and we were able to have that connection back then. Slight connected more later, but yeah, it's interesting the people that you come to meet, come to know in these spaces, because what Normandy was all about was teaching kids, but what we were all about was growing, and whatever that might mean. And so in that case, I got a chance to kind of explore different topics and different things, partly because of what they set up, and partly because of what people who love me facilitated.
Yeah.
So
Amazing.
That's incredible that you had a chance to go to that school, and that your mom had the foresight to put you in there. And and really, I can see your passion for art. We can see it, and just in speaking. But where did that originate from? Was it that LL Cool J tape, or was it like just the culture in itself? Because like you're looking at this year is the 50 years of hip hop.
Yes,
Yeah.
So
big
you've
year,
seen
big year.
every, not 50, but
Right.
you've seen a lot of versions of hip hop, and you've seen a lot of versions of the art and how it's changed. It's completely different now than it was when it was
Yeah.
the Sugar Hill Gang and
Oh,
LL Cool J.
completely,
Like those guys
completely.
had swag. Those guys were,
yeah.
and they still have swag nowadays, just in a
do.
different way.
Just older.
Yeah, just in a
older,
different
so
way.
much older.
Better though. I mean, it is. It's
was.
just better than what it is now. I'm just
Yeah,
saying.
you know, back then it was more about the craft of writing and being able to perform. So like emceeing became this idea about how you rock crowds, right? How you move people or move the crowd is how one person broke down MC and Rakim. And so so that means that you have to have breath control, being able to control when you breathe, when you're spitting these rapid fire bars, how clever you can be, how you might use different homophones to affect and create double entendres and such. I mean, these are all things that you don't necessarily get taught. You just learn it because you have so many MCs and so many rappers who are modeling that behavior. And people like LL Cool J, they cared about the craft. They cared about the poetry of hip hop. And certainly I got a chance to kind of witness that, you know, throughout my life. And so when I saw LL Cool J, it was the music video back when BET was, you know, doing music videos. And you had stuff like, you know, what was it like? Well, it was before The Basement. So it was just whatever the hip hop show was at the time. And so I get a chance to check it out. And I saw it. I was impressed because he was, like flying all around the space, you know, shirtless with his Kango on or whatever. So I'm bad. Like the whole thing, it was impressive. And so, I wanted to do that. And so I was like, okay, I could rap. And, you know, I was rapping in front of somebody. And again, I don't know how it might have come off. But if I made anything rhyme, then that's great. Because I'm sure
It's not easy to do.
Oh, it's not. Not to a beat.
I
Not
can't
in
do
freestyle.
it. Don't ask me to do it.
It's tough. But yeah, you're right. It's different. And there are still poets in hip hop, and there's poets in music in general.
in
but
general, yeah.
it's just broader, though. It's like a different type of music. It's not, you know,
But
it's.
you know what's interesting? Like when you think about like so you got some rappers who are really there for the party. You know, they're there for the fun, for the music. However they define fun, however they like to enjoy themselves, whatever that might mean. But there was always spaces for these people who didn't care about lyrics. They're the ones who would do their versions of scat, you know. They're the ones who would have like chants and things, but not necessarily do anything much more than that. And so you hear rappers today who they fashion these bars, these songs that aren't really about showing their lyrical prowess. They're just about moving the crowd, giving people a space to have fun, to kind of explore different topics. But it's always been there, like in the DNA of hip hop. You know, you had a bunch of people who could not rhyme. They did not rap. They were garbage back in the late 1970s, but then and through the 80s and 90s and so on, right?
You just don't hear the history of them. As much.
Right, because you know history.
They came and went.
Exactly, because they were largely, you know, garbage at that time, right? But when the culture began to shift in hip hop that allow for more voices and more styles of having fun, that's when I think you open up and have more rappers who can just do whatever they do. And the people who care, they'll continue to care. They just find new and interesting ways of expressing how they care about crafting lyrics.
Yeah, that's incredible. We're just talking about hip hop.
No,
This is
but
perfect for your class.
I'm not kidding. I'm like, so next semester I teach a class at our school called Poetics of Hip Hop.
Nice.
And I'm like, you want to come speak to my kids? Like, you could drop
real.
some facts for
real.
them. I
And
think
these are
that'd
high
be so
schoolers,
cool.
you know.
Yeah, that's cool. No, I love it. I love it because for a long time, hip hop artists had to argue for how poetry existed within hip hop. You know, how rap was poetry. And you know, but now for some they accept it, kind of like how they accept Michel Basquiat's artwork, his graffiti works, his abstract works as being, you know, phenomenal for the art world and worth millions of dollars. But at the time, it wasn't viewed like that. And the same thing about the poetry of hip hop; it wasn't accepted as such. Yeah. But you know, you have enough people who will talk about it, and then people who are poets, they understand that we're all talking about form, and the basic form of a lot of hip hop, at least the formula back in the 1980s and 1990s, necessitated 16 bars that could be broken down into 16 lines, and we're largely talking about couplets, sometimes quatrains, sometimes with very, interesting structures that have these internal rhyme schemes. So that's all poetry, it's just that it's street, they call it street poetry, right?
Yeah.
But it's only street poetry because people who are in the academy didn't co-sign it. That's all.
That's
So,
it. That's it.
I
got
can't
that.
wait for my kids to listen.
Yeah, we'll have to get you in there. So I want to kind of segue into the Regional Arts Commission and the
Yes.
work that you've been working on. We could talk about music all day,
All
but we
day.
got to talk about the work that you've been
Absolutely.
doing. So just give us an overview. I know you touched on it of what you've been doing, but let the people know kind of what this study is, what it means for the community, especially here locally, but also this is bigger than just local.
Yeah, it means a lot. So let's start with AEP 6, or Arts and Economic Prosperity 6. Our partners with Americans for the Arts have been producing this research since the 1990s. The big idea is that some people don't believe that arts and culture makes much of an economic impact for a region. They don't necessarily think that way. They think that, you go to the arts, you go to an event, that's nice, I'm glad you had that cultural experience, but they don't understand the kind of jobs that it creates, the kind of money that it moves around. And then if you have that sort of those dollars circulating in a community, then that means that people who wouldn't necessarily be able to benefit are benefiting from it. So whether we're talking about food truck vendors or people who have these small cafes or restaurants, well, if there were no one going to like a theater production that evening, would they have had customers at that restaurant? So it drives traffic in interesting ways. Let's say there's an outfit that you wanted to buy, but you wanted to have a special occasion to do it. Well, I mean, Beyonce created a really special occasion to have all kinds of nice outfits or whatever. So it can easily be seen as a surge in clothing sales just because people wanted to come right to a concert. But it doesn't just have to be Beyonce. It can be any sort of venue where you want to show up and you look your best. These are all a part of the economy. And if you are supporting any of these businesses and you have a reason to buy, then those are more dollars that are circulating. So AEP 6 captures that. It helps us to understand the sort of economic power arts and culture organizations actually wield on a day-to-day basis. It gets lost because you don't necessarily see the big crowd from like a sporting event. But if you think about it, that sporting event, if they have a winning season, and we won't get into details, but if they have a winning season, then you can see droves of people maybe downtown at one time, and then that filters out to all the different clubs and all the different restaurants and cafes and bars. That's great. But in between, what do you do? How do you drive traffic to these areas and create opportunities for these businesses to survive or to make any kind of revenue? Well, that's where the arts step in. And, interestingly, in St. Louis, I think it was, I forget the mayor, but back in the 80s, Vince Shamel was the mayor at the time. He and some of the other legislators and people who had a vision for how to prop up the arts culture in St. Louis decided to create the Regional Arts Commission, right? So that's 1985. And the whole idea is that how do you create economic development for the city of St. Louis? Well, how you do that is by making sure that you have a well-funded operation. They saw something that existed prior to, which was Arts and Education Council from like 1963, but that was something that businesses had to fund. And the organization went as the ebbs and flows of these businesses around the city were going, right? And so if they failed, then they failed to have enough money to circulate. So what is another mechanism that they created? So they created a public option to support the arts because they understood, as historians and political scientists will attest to, that the arts create economic development opportunities for a city. And it's been doing it ever since. So So we capture that. We capture that kind of data with our partners at Americans for the Arts. The other project that we do that we're doing right now is Creatives Count. So right now, if we wanted to know how many and what kind of experiences independent artists are having in the city of St. Louis County, and throughout the surrounding counties, we would have to probably look for, interviews from people. So that's anecdotal, and that's cool, but I mean, that's not enough. We would also maybe look at the Bureau of Labor Statistics, or maybe something with the census data, but that only tells us a piece of the picture,
Right.
like professional artists, right? We know that there's all kinds of educators out there, right? Some educators are working in the classroom and some are working outside the classroom. They're still educators, but they may not be counted
Right.
as educators. So the same thing with artists. There are artists who are working for businesses, but some of them are working on their own. They are self-employed. How do you capture that data? It's hard to capture that data. So what we've done is developed an instrument with our partners over at Wolf Brown, which is a national organization that also works with arts organizations, to be able to survey artists locally. And we've had over 1,500 artists who responded to our survey that happened over the summer, and that'll give us a complete or a better picture, a better understanding of how independent artists are operating in this space. Now, some of them are professional artists that might have been counted in, let's say, the Bureau of Labor Statistics survey, but some of them may not have been counted at all. And so we get a chance to look at that data. And this is the second one of its kind that the Regional Arts Commission has put out. The first one was called Artist Count back in 2013. So this is roughly about 10 years later,
yeah.
even though that research was completed in 2012. But this is about 10 to 11 years later, and we get a chance to kind of see how artists are progressing today relative to then, and give us a sense of where we might go. So
I think that's the most, and you go ahead after, but I think that's the most valid point, is actually talking to the real working artists in the St. Louis area. Because like you said, there's those people like, a Kababi, a Black Spade, that are, artists. They're, full-time working artists, but then you have an up-and-comer who works at a job that they don't maybe like, but they still work on the weekends, and they record and they do shows and they do, they do all of that, but you can't track that. You don't know where they're at.
You can't track it. And and to your point about Black Spade, so Black Spade is somebody who would have loved to have been working full time. But as we have a better understanding of industry in this area, industry throughout the country, how he might be able to plug in, we begin to see that there may not be enough dollars to support his work as a full-time recording artist, as a full-time performing artist, period. So that means that he has to work a 9 to 5 like all of us do at some point, right? We have to work a day job, and then he has to do his thing as an artist on the side. It's a great side hustle. Yeah. It's one that could give you a lot of notoriety, but it's still a side hustle because you can't rely on it.
You can't put all your effort into it either.
Yeah, right, exactly. Because there's only so much time of the day. And listen, I don't want to, sound like other kinds of theorists out here, but essentially every hour that you have to put into work for somebody else, that's an hour that you can't put into yourself or to even explore your creative ambitions. That means that you are tied to having to earn enough money to pay a utility bill than to explore and express your truth. And that's just the reality that we all have to balance in our society.
Mm-hmm.
So in terms of the data, and like that you just said, it's 2023, and so the last time we tracked anything was about 10 years ago.
That's right. For independent artists, absolutely.
Right. So then what's the goal going forward?
I think we intend to do Creatives Count every 5 years. Essentially, whenever we're doing arts and economic prosperity with our partners at AFTA, we'll be doing something that focuses on local independent artists. And then there'll be some things that, for example, with the census, they do these community surveys that are in between the 10-year census data collection periods. And so for us, we'll do something every year, but as we have a more concrete understanding of how many artists are operating in the region, we can then kind of track how those individual artists are experiencing the region. And we'll be able to do updates to our data dashboard just based on that. So hopefully, one, we'll develop a data dashboard, but then two, we'll be able to track how artists are moving through this space and how arts organizations are impacting the region.
Yeah. So what is your vision? And this is always a tough question, but your vision for art in St. Louis and more specifically artists of color. I know that that's a huge, factor in what you do.
Absolutely.
So if you want to just fill us in on some of the vision that you have in your work, because you're doing this for not you, you're doing this for, the region in a whole. So
yeah, exactly. the vision for me is that if you're able to provide a great knowledge base, that people can use that knowledge to inform their practice. They can also learn some timely lessons. For example, if your work is not enabling you to quit your full-time job or something like that, then there might be a reason for that. So part of my background is in sociology. I teach sociology. And so one of the things that we learn in sociology is called the sociological imagination. And what that is that sometimes we think the reason why we're not making it is because it's on us. Like individually, I'm messing up or I'm not good enough. But there might be economic or social factors that are at play that can help fill in the blank of the picture that we're trying to better understand. And so maybe we don't have an industry to support a black spade. Maybe we don't have, even though we get a sense of the robust nature of our economy through arts and economic prosperity, maybe that's really not enough to get to where we want to be. Maybe it has to be something that's bigger. Maybe the decades of depopulation for the city of St. Louis, as well as depopulation in St. Louis County, has affected artistry in ways that we hadn't quite measured just yet. Not just from audiences, but also just from the amount of money that can be circulating in the community. So it's interesting. So we'll be able to look at what St. Louis looks like in terms of the national picture, but then we can compare that with what's going on in different cities and regions, so we can again get a sense of what amount of money is floating out there that might be able to prop up and support their industry. So for us, more information, more data can inform our decision making. If you don't have enough information and you have to make decisions, you might make the wrong one. I mean, it seems like it's the right one at the time because of the available data, but like if one thing comes in later, just a few minutes after you made your decision, that could have changed your decision making, we kick ourselves, but that's just the truth. So for us, we want to provide St. Louisans with information to better understand how our region is doing, how an organization can flourish or why they might flounder, why an artist might be able to support himself, herself, themselves, right, in this region, or why they might need to exit to find another area that could better prop up their discipline. Right. So it's just to give people more information. And, our hope is that this information will help St. Louis become more vibrant, and a better space to incubate talent and for talent to feel like they can thrive and grow. So.
Well said.
Yeah, it is
well said. So, and I think that's vital, and I think that that's what the team at RAC does better than anyone is. It's more than just grants. It's bigger than grants. The grants are amazing, and everyone needs them to fulfill that. But it's more of the
resources, supports, connections.
Yeah, what I've been learning lately, like all these different things that they do, like summer internship, giving people jobs in the arts in the summer. Like there's all these things that I keep seeing, and we just see the highlights on social media. But when we get to talk to people like Jay, Jason, Vanessa, you that work there, and really get to see a deeper picture of that.
Oh yeah.
And then you can look at the data and look at the grants and look at how many, not only art organizations, but individual artists that that are getting that $7,500 grant that in the big scheme of things isn't a huge deal, but to them it's everything. And it matters. It all matters. It helps buy that new camera. It helps buy that.
And that's the other thing is like we always address how like art is so subjective to the person's talent. And so again, it's not just a matter of like picking up a paintbrush or your camera. Like there are so many forms, there's so many ways to highlight it. And so like you guys just offering those opportunities and resources for people, it's amazing.
Yeah, that's key. So again, from 1985, the view was that there is art happening all over the place. How do we better support it? And since 1985, that was the idea, to better support the arts. And I think as a result of it, we have a stronger arts community, and that nationally people are beginning to pay attention to some of the impacts that our funding decisions have made. Like not just who we fund, but how we fund, how we make this accessible, how we enable artists to be able to participate. Artists who haven't been able to participate because of accessibility issues in the past, now we're able to come to the table in meaningful ways, and they can use those dollars to kind of fund their dreams, their vision for how they can reshape or add to St. Louis in a meaningful way. So my hope is that we continue to master that part of what we do. And then as we figure out these other resources that we provide, that we're able to make those parts of RAC sustainable. Because nothing is promised.
Yeah.
You know, and all the good work that Jay and Jason do in helping to communicate about what artists are doing, about what RAC is doing, about what's happening in St. Louis. Well, that's because of the leadership that Vanessa provides. You know, she makes space for that kind of storytelling, that kind of marketing and promotion, whereas previous iterations of leadership made different choices. So we feel it differently now than then, you know. That's the reason why a lot more people might know about the Regional Arts Commission, as well as its iterations, like how else it might be seen and understood in the community than in previous times, just because of that vision. So yeah, it's that's what it's about. It's about making that connection.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard work too. So I know that you have something big coming October 23rd at Coca. It is the Cultura, Cultura 2023, and it's a unique mini conference that is big on innovation at the intersection of research, arts, and culture.
Totally.
Tell us about it.
All your things.
Tell us about it.
All the things.
Tell us about what's going on.
So yeah, I mean, so there's like two aspects of it. So there is the data presentation, right? We're gonna try to make this as engaging as possible. You know, anybody who educates knows that the moment you get on the microphone or get in front of an audience, there might be some people yawning. They might start drifting away, finding different places to be mentally. So we're trying to make it's hard. I mean, you know, listen, as somebody who teaches in the classroom, college students, I see the struggle every time. I see the struggle for them, and I get it. I get it. So we're gonna make the sessions as interactive, as engaging as possible, having as many different voices as possible. So you'll get the data, but you'll also have an opportunity to better understand the data, because we'll have a group of panelists who will be able to weigh in on it. Now, the thing about research of any kind is that you want people to offer a critical voice. Honestly, you do. You don't want people to just co-sign your work, because if there are ways to improve it, or let's say your research is trash and everybody says, oh, it's great, that's credibility problems right there. So you want people who can kind of weigh in on it. And so we're gonna have data presentation. We'll have a panelist to kind of offer their feedback over how they've read and understood the research that we've presented, and then we're going to have audience feedback in a really interactive, hopefully super engaging way. And so we're excited about this 45-minute format. This is all happening within 45 minutes per session. That way we don't lose anybody. You know, hopefully they're there, they're in rapt attention. They see the drama, the tensions, they have questions, they're fully engaged. That's the goal, to make this as interactive and as brief as possible while giving you as much information as you can honestly take in. You know, let's not kid ourselves and say if you throw a bunch of data at people, it's gonna just hit you and it's gonna stick. No, it might wash over you. So we want this to stick in some meaningful ways, but we have to be very intelligent and intentional about that design. So that's one thing. The other piece of it is we have this lounge that we're playing with. If you ever been to a conference, sometimes you can have data overload, right? So even though we're designing it in a way where hopefully there won't be much data overload, but if you do need to disconnect, we're going to have this lounge where there's going to be music played by live musicians, by a DJ. There'll be different refreshments. There'll be this complete immersive vibe in the space where people can just kind of network and connect with each other. And that's going to be happening concurrent with the data presentations. Now, it's going to be a limited space. We don't want everybody to run in there, because by the time we get to our State of the Arts address, which is going to be delivered by Vanessa Cooksey at 4:00, that gets shut down. There's no other presentations. We're going to focus on her, and she's going to recount some of the more interesting moments that we need to take away from the earlier presentations, as well as offer her vision going forward. So this is going to be in place of the town hall that RAC typically does every year, where they talk about the grant cycle and such. But this is going to be even more robust than that, right? So there's going to be a statement about the data that people heard. It's going to be a statement about grants that are being offered by the Regional Arts Commission, as well as the creative vision that RAC has for St. Louis.
And
Can't
that's
wait for
at
that.
Coca?
Coca.
And
Is
that's
that
the 23rd. Is that a Monday? The
Yeah, that's a
23rd?
Monday.
Yeah.
October 23rd. You know what? Listen, if you can get your students to come through, as long as you can get those permissions, that'd be great.
Yeah.
But no, because it's gonna be free and open to the public.
Okay.
The lounge, however, will have like a price tag on it, but it's free and open to the public otherwise, because this information should be available, especially this year. I can't say what next year is going to look like, because we have to make things that are sustainable. But
Right.
this year, we want to make this big and splashy and invite as many members of the community as possible to be a part of it.
Yeah,
be there.
very accessible.
Excellent.
Amazing.
I'll be there. I'm gonna be in that lounge though.
That's what's up.
Must have
That's
that
you need
ticket
to be.
link. Come
You
on now.
need to be.
With
You
food,
need-
live
Oh my
music,
God.
DJ.
Oh yes.
Oh, my
again,
goodness.
and lights
On a Monday?
And lights, a
Yes.
complete vibe, furniture. So we're gonna transform this wonderful lab at Coca,
Yeah.
where performers kind of practice and get themselves together, and sometimes other performers, do their thing in there. We're gonna turn it into a space where people can interact and kind of chill and just soak in the vibe. So that's music and that's connect. Right. We'll have these musicians that'll perform. Black Spade will likely be in that space. So we're really excited about having artists who are going to perform. And these aren't like long performances. It's a little bit like, without it being a bar, it's a little bit like a bar, right? Where at the bar or in spaces like that, you don't want to be you don't want to be hushed. You want to have your experience. We want this experience for attendees. So that means that there'll be some time where they are invited to pay attention, but because this is a wall-to-wall music experience, they can opt out and just be there for
And
themselves.
interact with people. Yeah.
Totally. Again, it's about decompression.
Yeah.
Really, it's about decompression and taking care of yourself. Whatever that care might mean, whether it's paying attention to an artist as they perform or just disconnecting and just being in your own little zone, do it.
So this is a great way for members of the community, but also other artists.
Totally.
To come.
We want artists to be there because the information that we're providing is vital for
them.
their practice. It's about them. They've contributed to this. Find out what everybody needs to know about being a practicing artist in this area. Same thing with organizations. Find out about how your organization's impact is going to help St. Louis move forward, how it compares with previous iterations of this research. And if you're a public official, find out about the economic development that comes with arts and culture activity and how we activate those spaces. There's plenty of reasons for people to come. They just need to come, and that way they can have a deeper knowledge base, a better understanding of the context in which we work, and how we might move forward as a region through the arts.
Knowledge is
I
power.
agree with you. And
Indeed.
and Jay told me a really, crazy statistic. People think St. Louis, they think, sports town, Cardinals, Blues, but more people travel into St. Louis to celebrate the arts than people that come to sports. And you got to think the Cardinals play 81 games a year.
That's crazy.
That's 40,000 people every 81 games.
Absolutely.
And that's just the Cardinals.
And
Yeah,
you know
the
where that
Blues.
data comes from? AEP.
Yeah.
Without AEP 5, we wouldn't have had that data to be able to share with people.
And use that tool.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Right.
So St. Louis really is an arts town, and you look around, and a lot of it's free.
Yep.
And that's one of the most beautiful things about it. It's a lot of the stuff.
If you
we do.
go back to, I would have to look and see, but like one of the earlier episodes when we had Jay and Vanessa on, Jay like dropped all of these places that do free art or theater performances.
drop the
like,
link. He's probably listening
Not
right now.
just, and again, we love the Fox, we love the Muni, but like those are your bigger name ones. There's so many venues across the region and city that you guys can go to. So
It's incredible.
check them out.
And we'll drop the
that.
link. We'll drop the link for the tickets for the VIP experience and stuff for the event on the 23rd as well.
And just to be real, part of the reason why there's so many free things is not because people are donating their time. Somebody's getting paid, right? There's no such thing as a free lunch, right? So that means that the philanthropic community of St. Louis has to step up to make sure that these things are free.
Right.
And that means that we might use mechanisms such as taxes or whatever the case may be in order to make it free so that it can be as accessible as possible. So the more they support organizations like the Regional Arts Commission, the better we're able to ensure that these events are free to the public.
Yep,
Absolutely.
Keep providing opportunities.
Totally.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you wanted to address in terms of just the work you're doing with RAC or just for listeners' sake?
One of the things that we're going to look at for 2024 is how we go into the community and collect data. Since we won't have an AEP 6 to collect data for our creatives count, what are some other ways that we might be able to collect data that will help us better understand the nature of festivals and fairs and things of that nature. And so at some point we will have like a call for people to help
Okay.
with their work. Anybody who's slightly interested in research or greatly interested in research, well, we're going to ask for that. Also, volunteers. We're always going to be in need of volunteers, especially as we do more work in the community, as we continue to do work in the community. I mean, just this a couple weeks ago, we had Jay and Jason, putting in all the labor, all the time,
Over at Evolution Festival.
That's right.
Yeah. Well, they were having fun too.
They were having a great time.
I saw them with the Sugar Hill Gang. They were kicking back.
You know what? But part of that struggle is making sure that we can kind of share the burden of being these places. So volunteering will be a big part of RAC's future because one, it gets people in the door to these events that they may not have gone to otherwise. But then two, it also gives us more people who are just kind of lifting up the arts and culture scene. And we say all hands on deck. It's important for all of us to do that work together.
Correct.
That's real. And especially when you got festivals, you have Festival of Nations, Music at the Intersection, Evolution Festival, all within 2 weeks.
All within.
Crazy.
It's crazy. I mean, Evolution and Festival of Nations on the same weekend,
And
right?
Schlafly's having their art outside event this weekend. I mean, there's so much going on because the weather starts to cool down. Everybody's like, all right, let's go. Let's go.
Let's do it.
And it
We're
was.
outside.
Last weekend was a good weekend. Really, really special. So I have really one. I think you answered my last question because I was going to say, how can the city get behind that mission? And I think, like you mentioned, just supporting volunteering.
Absolutely. Philanthropy, as I was reminded by a great person that does some work in this field, is about how we show our love for humanity, right? And so we might show love with our pocketbooks. We might show love by showing up and being present, whether it's episodic versions of support or programmatic versions of support. Bottom line to it, we're engaged, we're there, we're present. And that is the most important thing. If you're not going to be in the audience, then be present and show presence in other ways. Talk about this stuff. Mm-hmm. Share the wealth of knowledge that's already out there about these great events, because the more connected we are as a community, the better off these artists are that put on these productions. Because one of the things that's also true is that it's nothing worse than putting all this time and effort into building an event, building a theatrical program, whatever, and not seeing the audience as you would expect.
Right.
Seeing empty seats. Well, it doesn't have to be that way. We still have enough people in the metropolitan area to be able to support these events. So if you hear about it, go out there, support it, because a lot of these things are free or close to free, low cost.
Yeah.
So enjoy the arts, support the arts, partly because, one, it'll be enriching for you. There's plenty of stuff. I'll tell you a really quick story. My mom would take me to see a couple of different things. I remember two things that she took me to see. One, it was a play from the Black Rap. I got into it. I didn't want to go. I was a kid. I didn't want to go into anything. But she took me to see a play from the Black Rap. And then she wanted me to see this movie by this little-known director at the time named John Singleton. It happened to be Boys in the Hood. She took me to see it, and it was like, right, it was just a mind-blowing experience. And what was interesting about it is that I didn't want to do any of those things, right? So sometimes you have to pull people out of their
Comfort zones.
Yeah, totally. Pull them out of their comfort zones, pull them out of their doldrums, pull them out of their trajectories and set them on different paths. You have to do that work. And sometimes that comes from a friend, that comes from a neighbor, it comes from a lover of the arts. If you hear about an opportunity, definitely show up for it, because you never know what pathway that might put you on.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. I mean, I've never left an event. It's like, what's the worst that can happen? Just show up. What are you going to be at home watching the same TV show?
You just will. There's so much to appreciate, especially even if it's something that's not in your realm or nature, there is such an appreciation for people who have a talent of something that you don't do or don't know anything about. Every time we see anything, I'm just blown away. I'm like, wow, damn, she can sing. Or look at just imagine memorizing your lines for this or creating that piece of art. I could never do it. So there's just this like immaculate appreciation I have of just like, wow, like just the creative aspect. It's a beautiful, it's just, I sound corny, but I'm like, it's such a beautiful thing, you know?
That's right. I mean, and all of us have the capacity for self-expression in this creative way. And if
Right.
we have a world that recognizes the value in it, then no one has to feel weird about expressing themselves, right? So let's encourage that.
Gas
Let's,
each other up, y'all.
yeah, I'm saying, I mean, it can't hurt, you know, and we need to really kind of push this notion of like, what am I missing if I don't show up? You know, that's a real thing. You know, let's make that even realer. Let's make that more of a thing where people have this fear of missing out. Let's do that. You know,
FOMO.
let's push that because you never know the magic. I remember last year when there was music at the intersection, there was some musicians who left the festival and they did like another gig or whatever, but it was more of a jam session, but it was only known to a few people, but you had these wonderfully dope people coming together to do their things as jazz musicians and whomever, and people who didn't know, like me, like I didn't know, I missed out. And I would have loved to have been in that room, but you only know about it if you go in the first place. Right. Then you can hear whispers of it, and then you can figure out what moves you want to make after that. So hopefully we can just kind of stoke this fear of missing out. Hopefully people will use that to like get them into rooms so they can see all of what St. Louis has to offer artistically.
Absolutely. That's facts. So I got one more for you.
Sure.
It is the STL bucket list show.
Yes.
What that means is it's different for everybody, but everybody has their own bucket list things to do in St. Louis. Our bucket list different than yours. And I know there's a lot of things to do, so I like to kind of give you some options. You know, bucket list spots to eat around town.
Sure.
We want to know where you eat, not just because we want to go there, but it's cool to figure that out. Places to take the fam, date night spots, or even just parks and events. So really, it's kind of broad, and you can think about it for a little bit. But if you were to have somebody come into town, what are some spots that you would take people?
That's always
What
a
are
good
some
way to
events?
think of it.
What are
Like,
some events
this is
that you
where
would
we
take
have
them
to
to?
go.
Sure. I mean, you know, part of my history is that I was a part owner of a spot called Legacy. And so Legacy used to do like poetry every Friday night. And so we used to have some really cool people who pop up, national talent. And so if you ever really wanted to hear what poets were doing and how they were getting down, you would kind of come through for that. So that's always going to be special to me, even though they don't really do what they used to do because we're not really there to do it for them like how we used to. That's still a special moment because you have poets in the room. Some of them have never expressed themselves on a microphone before, and it gives them an opportunity to give them that platform to share their work and to be able to bear witness to that because you never know who you're witnessing. You never know who this person might be a few years from now. So no, I would say any open mic, honestly. Any open mic. Okay. I would go to any open mic that might be popping in St. Louis, that might be happening anywhere, no matter the size of the room, because you never know the size of the talent that might be in there.
Correct.
Yeah, that's facts.
Yeah. But like personally though, one of the things I want to do, I don't know where I would do this, but I would always like had a fascination with comedy, and so I don't know if I'd be any good at it, but that would be a thing I would do.
I love the comedy.
As a part of my bucket list. I would love to do comedy. Bomb or succeed,
We'll
but I
set
would
it up.
love
We
to
got
do
you.
it.
We'll
Just
catch
do
you
it.
at the Helium
Helium
Club.
Club.
There we go.
We just
We
saw
just
some.
went, like, what,
we
2
were
weeks
there, and there
ago?
was a room of 20 people.
We just
See?
love it. We just, I mean,
But see,
why
that's what it's
not?
about. That's what it's
Again,
about. That little intimate space, and you get a chance to kind of test out your material and, you know, connect with people. Because honestly, that's what it's about. If people are connecting with you and your humanity, they're laughing at your jokes, or at least appreciating what you have to say.
Yeah.
And I remember I just saw this documentary on Mark Twain, right? One of our first stand-up comedians. This dude was developing sets, and people were laughing, and people were showing up because they wanted to laugh, right? So this humorist was able to do that, and that's somebody who comes out of Missouri, you know? Somebody who comes out of the same spaces that we might visit whenever we're driving cross state or places where we might have been born. He comes out of that, and he was able to essentially shape what would become a major profession. So now I love the idea, and I would love to be able to do that. That's definitely on my bucket list.
I love that.
That's dope.
Awesome.
That's dope. Well, MK, thank you for stopping by the show today. For that event, we're going to drop all the info for
Please
it.
do, yeah.
But if not, do you have any personal stuff that you want to share, like any like links or anything like that, or any links that you want to drop?
Nah, nothing like that. If people find me, they find me. But the Regional Arts Commission, all of the brands that we're putting out there to ensure that people know about what's dope, what's happening in St. Louis, continue to follow that and check for those spaces. If you happen to be a student in one of my classes, good luck. I hope everything works out for you. Sometimes it doesn't, but that's
It is what
Shout
it
out.
it is
is.
what
Shout
it
out to
is.
the students.
But otherwise, I'm always grateful to be in spaces where we can uplift arts and community the way that you all are doing. So thank you for that. Okay.
Yeah,
Thank
thank you.
you.
See you guys next week. Appreciate you.
Today they rep St. Louis, yeah. They rep St. Louis. They rep St. Louis.